Most of us have heard the phrase early detection saves life. But what happens when breast cancer isn't caught early? For some men, the first diagnosis isn't stage 1 or 2, it's already stage 4. Today's conversation is about living with metastatic male breast cancer. It's about resilience in the face of the unexpected, the stigma of a women's disease, and the power of speaking out when silence is the easier option. Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Priyanka Mathur, physician and founder of MediPocket, the world's first physician led AI driven cross border care concierge company. At MediPocket, we help people across the globe access advanced cancer treatments, clinical trials, and world class US healthcare. But health isn't only about access, it's about visibility, awareness, and breaking down stigmas that can keep people from getting timely care. Now, male breast cancer is one of those areas where stigma and lack of awareness can be just as dangerous as the disease itself. And that's why I'm truly honored to welcome today's guest, Jake Messier. Many of you know, I would say, would know him as the guy with stage 4 breast cancer on Instagram, where he shares his journey with honesty, humor, and courage. Jake is living with metastatic breast cancer, and instead of retreating, he has chosen to educate, advocate, and build community. His story challenges misconceptions, bring visibility to men in this fight, and shows us that advocacy can be just as life-changing as medicine. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic intro. I don't even know how I'd ever be able to live up to that. So thank you.
Let's start at the beginning. What was the first sign that something wasn't right, and how did you finally get to a diagnosis?
So I think where a lot of guys start is a delayed diagnosis, because we are not taught in 7th grade health class to go back and look for lumps. And if you find a lump, then what could that mean, right? And so I don't exactly know when I first noticed I had a lump in my armpit, in my axilla. And it was probably the March, April timeframe of 2023. I don't exactly know, but I was like, oh, that's weird. And I think that's exactly how I thought. That's weird. And then it didn't get any better. So I probably waited about 4 to 5 months before I actually got in to see a doctor. So I got in to see him, and my primary care physician, listed off about 10 things that it could be, and none of them were breast cancer. But he was also wise enough to send me for a biopsy. And that's when I was diagnosed, was in August of 2023. So, it's shock and awe and looking at the screen saying, wait, I have breast cancer. And I go back to, I think I was aware prior to getting breast cancer that guys could get breast cancer. I know now, but I don't remember if it was certainly top of mind. So I think if I had found the lump and it was top of mind, I think I probably would have got it checked out sooner. So it was August of 23, and we've been in this fight for about 2 years now.
Was mammogram ever been prescribed?
Well, I think initially I did get a mammogram at first. So I think they sent me straight to mammogram, and biopsy was all sort of the same time frame. It was just like, let's see what's going on in there. So I did get a mammogram, and that was, difficult. There's not a lot of breast tissue here to compress, right? In fact, I've heard some people in the male breast cancer world say that they should start calling it a manogram, and also come up with a device or something that perhaps could look at the breast tissue that does a different thing that men would be more comfortable. And I take that out because it's also women that don't have a lot of breast tissue, right? It does, just doesn't really matter, but men in particular just don't have a lot of breast tissue to do that mammogram with.
That experience walking into a center for a mammogram?
It's, at that point, I am now very comfortable living in the pink world, right? That's where we are, right? We live in the pink world as men with breast cancer. But at that point, it definitely was emasculating. It definitely was jarring because I think because breast cancer, female breast cancer, is so prevalent and so well researched and so well connected that when a woman gets breast cancer, there's a flood of information, there's a flood of resources, there's a flood of even community and or national organizations that are going to reach out to you and that you can find support with. And it's honestly just not the case with men, right? There are currently 3 major, and I'll put major in quotes, male breast cancer organizations out there. And typically what happens is somebody gets a guy will get a diagnosis and they stumble upon one of these 3 organizations, which are great. They will help you. They certainly sending out the chemo backpacks and this, just helping you find your footing as a new patient in the male breast cancer world. But yeah, there's just not the resources, both at the clinic level, right? You know, you walk into a lot of waiting rooms and they're pink and flowers and very feminine, right? And that turns a lot of guys off. I don't care. I've been wearing pink long before I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it doesn't bother me, but it does bother a lot of men. And so that's, you know, you have a delay in diagnosis. And then when you enter the pink world, it can be hard. It can be emasculating. It can be a place that you don't necessarily want to be. And all of those factors, the psychosocial factors, are what leads, you know, the mortality rate for men in breast cancer has not gone down in 30 years. And it has dropped dramatically for women in 30 years. And it's the exact same as it was in the mid 90s because we're getting diagnosed later. And then there's even anecdotal evidence that guys that come into the breast cancer treatment world, they don't want to stay there. They don't want to be part of the pink world. And so guys will either stop treatment or not be involved in treatment as they could be because of the psychosocial stuff out there. So it's a needed it's funny because breast cancer is so well known, right? But people just don't take that extra step to think that anybody with a mammary gland, anybody with breast tissue can have breast cancer. And we just don't take that into the equation that 50% of the population could come down with breast cancer. Now it's 99% of all breast cancer cases are women and 1% are men. So the odds are very, very, very small that you're going to end up with breast cancer. In fact, the list of 10 things that my primary care physician thought it could be is likely what it could be. And so when people reach out to me on social media, I certainly don't give any medical advice, but the thing that I do give is, hey, you need to get checked out because there is a small chance. And so, yes, we make sure that we tell people that they should go get checked out, even when that's not even top of mind for most guys.
Brought a very important point. Why it gets diagnosed late or delayed diagnosis is because the awareness, and not just from the patient world or the caregiver world, but also physicians. Physical examination, we all go every year based on, the age criteria. Mm-hmm. Some go every 6 months, some every year. But when male go, I don't think so. We examine the breast area as for the female, because that's part of a normal examination when for the female is a physical exam. And that's how they get detected early. Other thing you pointed out is in 7th grade, we learn about biology, right? And we learn about common conditions or in cancer, there are a few common cancers the kids are told about. Breast cancers are always labeled as female cancer. Mm-hmm. So as a child growing up as a young man, you would ignore any signals that your body is showing because you're mm-hmm. like, no, that doesn't happen to men or like that.
Right.
It's very critical what you're saying. And the social, right? I mean,
that's the part that I'm most intrigued with, that I'm most, it's the part that kills more men, right? Because of the awareness factor and the delayed diagnosis. That's the part that more men die every year from. So there's only 2,800 of us that get diagnosed every year. It's a very small number as compared to female breast cancer. So the more we can, I think when a guy gets breast cancer, he's obviously very well aware that breast cancer exists, right? But there's stats out there that say, I've found all kinds of stats that I've found interesting since I've started this process. And one of which is that 80% of men that interesting since I've started have breast cancer directly affecting their lives, whether that be a wife, a mother, or a sister, right? A direct tie to breast cancer. 80% of those men don't know that they can get breast cancer. So, like, these are people that are involved in the breast cancer world and they don't know. And I can't tell you the number of clinicians, whether they be nurses or doctors or whatever, that have turned to me and said, "Wait, you have breast cancer?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I mean, a number of nurses have like, "I didn't know that guys could get breast cancer." And I'm like, maybe we should be teaching this in nursing school and medical school and all these other things. Just simply because there is the ability to teach this. And that's the thing. This is not something that has to be a whole nother thing. It's just a women can get breast cancer and men, right? It's just a simple and men, right? There's women and men can get breast cancer. And so that's what I think has to really start, both from the Department of Education with seventh grade health classes and teaching young men so that maybe 50 years from now, every guy that has gone through the American, education system understands that guys can get breast cancer. And that would be wonderful. That started, way back when with women, but even just general awareness, right? Women are 75 years ahead of men in terms of the awareness campaigns. And usually when I'm on my social media, people are on, my main account is on TikTok, and then I put everything on Instagram. And, people aren't going on Instagram and TikTok for a really in-depth conversation about male breast cancer. So I have to treat it with humor or with personality or whatever, and then basically sneak my message in there, which is, hey, guys can get breast cancer too. And then I sort of have to fade off into the background, which is about what most people want to hear on social media. But we now have grown our platforms to be the largest male breast cancer platforms in the world. We have 32,000 people, very active, engaged people on TikTok, and about 7,000 on Instagram. And I understand in the world of real influencers, that 32,000 people is nothing as compared to the real world of influencers. However, in the cancer world, and especially the male breast cancer world, that's a significant number to be talking about this rare of a disease.
And, I always say, and nothing against the influencers who are doing very proper, because everything takes effort, but dancing around is easy and it entertains everyone, sure, right? But information like that takes people, it takes courage to listen also, because we like to not listen because, like, hey, it's I would never have it, or it's not for me, it's not for my family member. And as a female, as a physician, I always say, we have father, we have son, we have husband in our family. Let not be ignorant. Maybe they might not realize, or maybe have a little bit, but if we can be a one supportive one or proactive one, telling them, hey, if you feel it, tell it.
92% of my audience, I'm not talking to the male breast cancer audience out there. 92% of my audience are women aged 35 to 54. That's my audience. So oftentimes I'm encouraging them to be like, look, if your guys aren't going to find their own lumps, then find them for them and just alert them to it, right? You may be touching your guy's chest more than they are, right? And if you find something funky, then at least tell him and make sure. So, we try to, handle this with as a very serious disease with as much humor and as personality that we can, to make sure it's easily acceptable by sort of the masses.
Man in the pink world, now being a man with breast cancer carries all sorts of challenges, as we talked few of those. What stigmas, or let's say misconception, did you encounter early on?
I'd say that the first 6 months was definitely had a lot of feelings of emasculation, right? You're surrounded by women. All your peers are women, right? I went to an initial cancer center before I ended up at Dana-Farber, and there was no other men in that entire cancer center in terms of male breast cancer, right? Even at Dana-Farber, which is a world-class organization, they've only got a handful, right? There's only a couple of us there. And so it was hard to be part of that. One of the stories that I tell about this, and I when I had my mastectomy, I woke up, and I try to tell this because the nurses were trying to be kind to me. I'm not saying that they weren't being kind to me, and they were looking out for me. But the nurses, they didn't. I woke up from the surgery, and they didn't put a bind on me, an abdominal surgical bind on me. And the reason that they said is because we only had them with pink and flowers on them. And I looked at them and I said, do you honestly think I'm going to turn down a medical device because it has pink and flowers? I'm going to, of course, put it on me. And they were trying to look out for my sensitivities, and I understand that. But at the same time, guys, either A, get beige or brown medical binds, or just talk with the guys beforehand and just understand that you're going to put them on. I mean, that's fine. You know, I say this a lot, that I've been pushed back a lot from the breast cancer community. Like, look, guys need to get over this stigma and get over the amount. And I understand that to a point, that there's 3,000 years of toxic masculinity going on in the world. And are we going to solve that problem with breast cancer? No. It's probably a much easier exercise to just paint your waiting room green. We'll work on the toxic masculinity stuff also, but painting your waiting room green is a way easier solution than trying to change, you know, men's minds on stuff like this. So, I mean, there are people out there that men who call it chest cancer, right? It's not, you know, I go back and forth. It's actually Beyonce's father, Matthew Knowles, has breast cancer, but whenever he refers to it in public, it's always chest cancer, which is, we all deal with these things in our own way, but it's not correct. And I was thinking, I was asking some researchers, I'm like, is there such a thing as chest cancer? Like, chest is more of a region, right? I don't think chest is a thing. I'm like, is there such a thing as chest cancer? So I don't think that there is, but lots of guys deal with this in lots of different ways. I just happen to be very outspoken. I've been very outspoken for a number of years on a lot of different subjects. And it just happened that I got breast cancer. And so I've turned my advocacy, my attention towards this. I owned my own marketing agency. Nonprofit marketing was my career for 30 years. And so when I decided to turn on the branded channels, the guy with stage 4 breast cancer channels on Instagram and TikTok, I used 30 years of experience of nonprofit branding and experience to grow these in a way that I would grow a client in the past.
You come with an experience to spread the word. I would say like that. These platforms are about spreading your message, spread the word. If it's a product, then you do it to sell a product. If it's a knowledge base, you do it to sell the knowledge. And I think that's why people are following you, because there's a way to give this message. And to be honest, this message, as you said, it's very sensitive, you know, in various ways. And again, hopefully it will be, because if we can treat female breast cancer with empathy and sympathy, everything, then why not the male the same way? Why we have to look at differently? It's still the same disease a person is fighting as a human.
It's still the same disease. And that's an excellent point. When I left, my advocacy started when I left my previous cancer center. There was a number of issues with them, and I ended up bringing my oncology team together, and at first I was just going to complain about my care, right? That was my initial thing, was you've done this to me, and you've done this to me, and this has been bad. And I was like, look, if I'm going to actually change anything, if I'm going to hope for the better, it can't just be about me. And so I changed the narrative of that conversation to be about policy at the hospital. And I was like, look, if I am the top of the healthcare food chain, right? If I'm a white, fully insured male and I'm paying my own way and all this, what are you doing to the single Hispanic mother of 2 that doesn't have the communication skills or the engagement skills or the ability to go to Dana-Farber? What are you doing to the hundreds, if not thousands of people in your system that aren't standing up? So I decided to turn the advocacy. Yes, I was going to use it as my example, but also turn it around to try and help other people. That was the beginning of, where I started advocacy. And then as that grew and grew and grew, mostly on social media, I started getting more attention. And then I went to the National Breast Cancer Coalition's Project Lead training, which is held every summer. And what they do is they bring in various people from the breast cancer world, and they train us on how to be advocates. They give us, a 3-day crash course on microbiology and all of these things. And we get world-class clinicians and researchers from around the world to teach us these. They'll start like, yeah, I'm going to teach you my entire freshman microbiology class in about the next 6 hours, and we're getting all of this information in. And they teach us how to be clinical trial advocates as well as legislative advocates. And the one thing that I sat there as I was going through the training, some things applied to me and some things didn't, right? There was 49 women there and me. There was, and they've had a handful of guys go through the program over the years, but there were some things that didn't apply to me. So you look at my notebook that I was writing throughout the week, and you'll see me asking questions on certain things. And basically where I ended up with my thesis at the end of the week was, look, am I going to bang my head against the wall for the next 10 years trying to get research funded on male breast cancer when in the history of breast cancer research, 75, 80, 100 years, however long that's been going on, there has never been one single study done on the differentiation of male and female breast cancer. Never. And so you're looking at, I say that there's actually one going on right now at Dana-Farber. It's a very small controlled clinical study, but there is one going on right now, which is really great. So I looked at that and said, well, I'm not the smartest guy in the room here. I'm not the first person to raise their hand and say, hey, we should probably research this. And I'm probably not the first person that said, I'm going to write a bunch of grants or sit as a clinical trial advocate or do whatever I can do to try and get these things funded. Because if any of the major breast cancer organizations wanted to fund male breast cancer research, they would have done it by now. They've had 75 years to think of a question to try and go and do it. So I basically decided to, instead of becoming an advocate in that way, I create the funding source. So over the past 10 weeks, we have created the Male Breast Cancer Research Foundation, which is the first one of its kind. There's 4 male breast cancer organizations out there. There's 3 that are more service support, that are helping guys that are just newly diagnosed or helping guys in their journey. And then we are going to be strictly research focused. We're going to be 70% or 60% of what we are doing is going to be the true healthcare and medicine of breast cancer and how the differentiation between the genders can be looked at. And the other 30% will be mental health and psychosocial research, which will help these 3 other organizations that are providing support. We can say, hey, this is what we found out from our research. You may want to tweak your programming here or here or here. We are fully partnered with these 3 other organizations. We're not working against them. We are working with them to help hopefully provide research that will fund their programming. We're not going after the same dollars. They're going after social support dollars, and we're going after research dollars. They're different. So we're not in competition at all. So we've built everything. We've got the website, we've got the bylaws, we've got the pitch deck, we've got a board, we've got a medical advisory board, we've got people, we've got staff working on. There's numbers that say 65% of all breast cancer research intentionally excludes men. 65%, and that's because we are so statistically irrelevant that we would skew the numbers if they decided to study it. So I understand that. I'm not one of those people that's demanding that every breast cancer study. I get that we are such a small anomaly, but there are differences. There are definitive differences between the male and female biology, even when it comes to medication, right? So they treat me, I'm on the tamoxifen and Verzenio cocktail right now. My doctor, my oncologist, is Dr. Pablo Leone, and he's from Dana-Farber, and he'll tell me every time, Dana-Farber is one of, I think they're the only male breast cancer department in the world. And he happens to be the head of the male breast cancer department. And he tells me, he's like, Jake, I don't know anything about male breast cancer. And that's because nobody's ever done anything to tell you how it differentiates. He goes, I treat you the same way that I treat the other women in my care, which is, at this point, you would be on tamoxifen and Verzenio. He goes, I don't know if that's the best course of action for you to be taking, because that's an estrogen tamping, drug. He goes, it works. So I'm gonna do it, but I don't know if that's the best course of treatment for you because nobody's ever done any studies on it. So the need is out there specifically for male breast cancer research in hoping that we can find a cure for all, right? When lots of organizations have, finding a cure for all. Well, we, the 1%, we, the guys, as part of it, we are part of the all. And so if it's not going to do any good for your, curing breast cancer for all, if you cure breast cancer for women, but then guys are still over here with weird little things. So, that's our goal. That's my goal over the next, year or so, is to establish, and we've already got founding research partners. We've already got people established in this, which is great. We already have, I don't even have a way to accept donations yet, right? We're working with a fiscal sponsor right now. I don't even have a way to accept donations yet. And we've got a $10,000 commitment and a $50,000 commitment of doing this. And I understand that $10,000 and $50,000 in the world of clinical trials is nothing. I get that. But when you're starting with zero, when you have $0 and you can introduce male mice, this is another issue. I was told by a researcher, he goes, Jake, you could give me $1 million for breast cancer research and it wouldn't matter because I don't have male cell lines and I don't have male mice. He goes, I've been working in breast cancer labs for 25 years. I've never seen a male mouse in my lab, ever. It's only female mice. So we are injecting drugs intended for women into female mammary glands and getting results for women. But they are never injecting that into male mammary glands to see if there's any supplemental findings. So the Male Mouse Project, which is going to be a sub-program of the Male Breast Cancer Research Foundation, is working to put as many male mice into labs. And that's not as easy as just buying some mice. And, you have these labs that are set up that have animal husbandry people that have to keep the mice separated and all the things that have to happen. So the Male Mouse Project will be starting, and we will be, lab mice cost about $150 a pop. So we will work on, if you're already doing a breast cancer clinical trial, then inject these male mice over here and just see what happens. Let's get some supplemental findings on what's going on. And so that researcher was like, okay, well, we got the male mice in. He goes, and then the next day they were like, we got another problem. I'm like, oh, of course we do. He goes, the problem is that we don't have any male breast cancer cell lines. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, well, there's upwards of 80,000 breast cancer cell lines out there that when a researcher wants to inject, either medicine or cancer into female mammary glands, they have access to all of these breast cancer cell lines to do that. You know what they don't have any of? Guys. No, there's none out there. So we'll start the Male Breast Cancer Cell Line Registry, which part of the funding we'll have 10 to 15, maybe 20 locations set up around the country. And that guys can go and donate their DNA. They have to be either a breast cancer survivor, a current breast cancer patient, newly diagnosed. It doesn't necessarily matter. Just as long as you have breast cancer and you can submit your DNA, then so hopefully if we get $1 million and some male mice and the Male Breast Cancer Cell Line Registry, we'll actually be able to do some work. So that's sort of what's going on over the past few months, and what we're hoping in October, we're going to be launching this thing for real, because it's, obviously Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but the week of the 17th is Male Breast Cancer Awareness Week. And so we're going to be launching that week. And while I understand Breast Cancer Awareness Month has a lot of noise and a lot of things happening in there, I think just because of who we are, we'll be able to cut through a little bit of that noise. And then we're going to be in San Antonio, and we'll launch a little bit more then. And then next year, our ask, which is part of why this works, is that we're going to walk around to every breast cancer organization that currently funds breast cancer research, and we're going to ask them for 1% of their funding. We're 1% of the population. We need 1% of the funding. So if you give $1 million to breast cancer research, I'm only looking for 10,000. I'm not looking for an equitable share. I'm looking for 10,000. And a lot of people have said that the ask in this is the most brilliant part, right? You can't, if you're already giving $1 million, if somebody comes along and asks for 1%, 10,000 more, you have to be a real jerk to be like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Wait, we want to take this a step further. What if we dedicated 1% of our staff time to male breast cancer? That's, if we have 365 days in a year, 3.5 days of every person's staff time going to male breast cancer. He goes, they said, I can guarantee that we're not spending 3.5 days per person working on male breast cancer. And I said, that's what you need to be thinking about, using staff time, using your resources. And that's how real change is implemented.
It's really a very deep word and a work. And I think starts from the foundation, male mouse. And we didn't realize, again, I'm a physician. And, for me also, this information is like, it's really not starts at the middle or at the end. It's very beginning where it's like male mouse. And one thing, yes, the percentage is less, but that percentage is from 2.5 million breast cancer cases. So it's not few hundred, it's few thousands. And that's not a very small number. There are clinical trials that are going for rare conditions, where it might be just handful of 100 patients in the world, but the clinical trials are going for, such conditions. So if we compare that way, do we justify a clinical trial for a male breast cancer? Is like, yes, medically, it will be after trials to see which cocktail works better and all that. But it won't be very different. It's not like, oh, we have to completely come up with a new medicine or anything, right? It's like regulation of the dosage, as we call it, right? And you regulate, do I have to go estrogen up? I have to go estrogen down based on, such modifications would be needed after a trial. And also it's genius the way that you put, 1% of what's already going, right? It's no brainer.
I'm not asking for a lot. I'm asking for 1%. And when you start off with zero, when you have nothing, 1% makes a big difference, right? Even just the commit. If we didn't make any more money other than the two commitments we have right now, $60,000. Do you know how many male mice we could buy at $150 a pop to put them into labs for that's the kind of dollars. Yes, when the breast cancer world is looking at $100 million in research or much larger, yeah, our $60,000 doesn't mean very much. But when you're talking about getting male mice in there with supplemental findings, that's a very different story. And so we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. There's breast cancer research has been going on for 75 years. We're looking to, can we intersect now so that we can save guys' lives in the future? That's all we're looking at doing right now.
And I believe when the messages reaches to the people who have the capacity, resources, and influence, the numbers, the dollar number is not that big that they cannot make it happen. I think it's just people need to be open to talk about it. As we brag about donating to charities and to the breast cancer, and here, why not equally brag about, or I'm saying brag in a positive way, but talk about I'm donating this much for this new research and a male breast cancer. And that will do a little ripple effect. What happened to a female breast cancer, it wasn't like this, I believe, 50 years ago. It wasn't as old, you have pink every month, right? But people stepped up, started talking, people joined the community. It became like, okay, even, you go to these restaurants, you go to the fast food store, and they want you to round up. And if it's a breast cancer month, would you like to donate to round up to a breast cancer cause, right? So it became something where people now get connected to the kind of missions. Like, yes, this is an important, let's get connected.
Every youth sports team, they wear pink socks. Everybody is included in breast cancer. But my grandson, he was a captain of the soccer team. So he was wearing a pink armband last year. And he said, for my pep. And I can't tell you the number of conversations that my 9-year-old grandson had about male breast cancer because he was in honor of his grandfather, right? I was not most of the time when kids are doing this, it's in honor of their mother or their grandmother or whatever. And he had a lot of conversations with his teammates, with coaches, with other people that were like, wait, your grandfather has breast cancer? And that just starts a conversation. And Max is 9 and had those conversations at 9. So he's out there advocating for me and for all the other guys out there. It's great.
If we say like father, like son, here like grandfather,
like exactly.
It's talking. A 9-year-old could be very proud talking about all these anime and stuff. But as someone who's have a courage to go out in the world and be like, I may not know everything, but I'm ready to talk.
No, I have metastatic because it jumped from my breast to my hip bone. So in about a year into my diagnosis, almost exactly a year, they found a tumor in deep in my hip bone, and that was when it jumped to metastatic.
Okay. So, living with breast cancer itself is a struggle. Now, with the
Sure.
metastatic disease, it's a marathon, not a sprint now. So, which
Hmm.
treatment or daily life has tested you the most?
Well, I think they all have their parts, right? Chemo wasn't fun. And radiation wasn't fun. And recovering, I ended up having I had my mastectomy, but then I had two other surgeries after that. So, that string of surgeries. So, and now being on endocrine therapy, which has its issues, tamoxifen or Verzenio. I like to say it's chemo light, right? It doesn't have the same things, but yeah, there's certainly the first few months of tamoxifen are really rough. And then your body sort of gets used to it, or you get used to it, I suppose. And you live. So I think at this point, the part that is the most difficult is when I don't necessarily feel sick, but I know that I am, right? And I'm still trying to push myself in the ways that I pushed myself before. I used to be very active, and I still am. But now there are times when my wife, who's my primary caregiver, she'll be like, "Hey, have you rested enough? Have you drank enough water?" And these are things that I thought about doing before, but now it's a necessity, right? It's something that I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself, because things can go downhill pretty quickly if I don't. And so, living, I don't try to live it every day. It's harder because breast cancer is now my job, right? It's between social media and the Male Breast Cancer Research Foundation. I'm living breast cancer every day. And I used to tell the story where I knew a woman who lost her daughter when she was like 12. I believe she lost her to melanoma. And that woman started up a nonprofit the next year, and she never got a chance to grieve her daughter's death because she was constantly living. Every day her daughter's death was her job, right? It was she never got a chance to ever get away from it. She never got a chance to sort of step away from it, because her daughter's death was so impactful for not just her, but for the nonprofit it was creating, that it became her job. And I've said to my wife multiple times, like, look, if breast cancer is already all encompassing, right? Especially metastatic, it's always on your mind. But now that breast cancer is my job, I spend probably 3 to 5 hours a day on social media, either content creation or community management, talking to my audience, or working on the Male Breast Cancer Research Foundation. I told my wife there's going to have to be days when I don't do breast cancer that day. I'm going to go sit in the living room and do anything else but breast cancer, because it's bad enough when you're already living with it as your life. When you take it on as your job, it's just something different. So now I make a very concerted effort that at least once a month, on a day that I should be working on, I just set aside and I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to work on breast cancer, because I need that mental checkout. My wife will say all the time, she gets to go away with her girlfriends for a weekend, right? She gets to go to Atlanta to her best friends. And she gets to detach from breast cancer. She gets to not have to worry about me. She has to not be constantly be checking on me. She gets to detach from that. And she said, I feel really bad because you never get, even if we go on vacation, which we've done, right? Even if we go on vacation or do something fun or whatever, go to the amusement park, I'm still a stage 4 metastatic breast cancer patient at an amusement park or on vacation, right? And so I never get a chance to really get away from it. I have to do this just for my own sanity and step away from it so that I'm not living in it all the time, or else my mental health my therapist would probably have to be 2 or 3 times a week rather than once. So yeah, I mean, it's I I enjoy what I'm doing, and I've been in this world for a long time. I've been a news anchor, I've been a DJ, I've been out in the public eye for a long time. So I don't have a problem doing it. But there are days when I just need to be like, I need to forget as much about breast
I mean, you have built a powerful community online. How did sharing your journey publicly impact your own healing process? And
cancer.
what responses from others have surprised you, both in a positive and in a negative way?
Funny, I think, a lot of people, and believe me, I just don't sit on TikTok in the breast cancer world, right? I'm on TikTok in a lot of other places. And, social media can be an ugly place, right? It can be, right? Depending on where you're talking and that kind of a thing. The cancer community in social media isn't necessarily like that. And I will tell you that the small community that we have grown on TikTok, because like I said, I can't be talking to the male breast cancer audience. If that's all I was talking to, that would be a really small audience. So my audience is mostly women 35 to 54. And so that community of mostly breast cancer survivors, breast cancer patients, whatever, somebody in the breast cancer journey, that community has been overwhelmingly positive. And I will tell you that I get a lot of encouragement off of hearing people share their journeys. I get a lot of encouragement off of people saying, "Hey, I listened to your thing and I went and scheduled my mammogram." And I was like, "Great." Or, I have gotten guys that'll reach out to me saying, "Hey, I've got a lump." And I'm like, "Great. What you need to do is go get it checked out." Chances are it's 99% to 1%. Chances are it's nothing, but you need to get it checked out. If you're here and you're concerned and you're writing a stranger on social media, then you need to go get it checked out. So overwhelmingly positive, from my perspective of how social media treats me. Yeah, there's occasionally the people that aren't kind, but if that's 99% to 1%, and that truly is, it doesn't bother me. I've been in the public eye long enough to have a pretty thick skin on these kinds of things. And so for the most part, this audience and this community, whether it's doing podcasts, whether it's doing social media, whether it's doing live events, I go out and I appear as, Jake, all of it has been overwhelmingly positive.
Do you think this response, which is definitely more positive than negative, which is, good, because sometimes social media can be very brutal.
Sure. Right.
Do you think that has given you a different strength to go with your own journey? Because now it's not for you yourself, but it's for a lot of other people that are your community. Do you think it would have been a different if you would have handled it just by yourself, closed doors?
100%. There's the old Greek proverb that say wise men plant trees that they're never going to sit in the shade of, right? And that's sort of what I'm doing here with the Male Breast Cancer Research Foundation will likely never impact my male breast cancer journey. It likely never will. But if it impacts hundreds, if not thousands of guys that are going to get diagnosed, that are maybe starting their journey, or whatever the case may be, 100%, it is well worth it in my viewpoint to do this type of advocacy work.
We have seen how this community, the social platform, has really helped in many ways, I would say. On the other hand, you are helping them in many, many big ways currently and for the future, which, as you said, that's what the wise people do.
It's a yin and yang. They help me and I help them. And there are days when I need more help, and there are days when the community needs more help, and I step in on those days.
That balance is always very beautiful, because you're just not, it feels like you're not just fighting alone. You're fighting together. Some days for them, for some days they for you. How has this journey reshaped your outlook on life? And what are you most focused on as an advocate today, besides just the focus of a male breast cancer in research? What is the other focus, as if we talk about life overall?
Oh, I think when you are diagnosed metastatic, right? That's I was 52 when that happened, right? I'm only 53 now. It's not like, typically I would have a much but you start having very difficult conversations, right? I have a 15-year-old son that I started having conversations with him on timelines. And my parents are both still alive and relatively young. And I started having conversations with them about possibly them outliving me, and very, very, very hard conversations. But those conversations have brought us all, and when I say us, I mean my inner circle, right? I have layers of circles, right? I have my inner circle, which is my family. I have a massive support network, whether that be my best friend, my wife, my children. It has been a tremendous value and a support to me. But then when you go out, there's that next layer, which is all the friends that have supported my wife and I. And then you go out another layer, which is the thousands, if not millions, of people that have been impacted by this and that have just shared a thank you, right? That's I think the most important part to me. It's just, hey, thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this in a way that is not obtrusive. I think a lot of male breast cancer guys sit around waiting for you to say, women in breast cancer do this, and they raise their hand and like, and men. And I'm like, yes, I get it. And they do it constantly. And in my mind, it's disruptive. It's not something that, yes, we get it. You don't have to be raising your hand every time. I'll ask very gender specific questions in a forum, but I won't, raise my hand and say and men every time, because I think that's not the way to go. Before I got sick in August of 23, I had spent about 2 years trying to make myself into a better human being. And at that point, I weighed a lot more than I do now. I weighed almost 300 pounds. And I decided that I was going to not only lose weight in a very natural way. I didn't do anything funky that was going to make me blow up again if I stopped doing that. So I did it in a very natural way. But I also decided to turn over all the emotional rocks that perhaps had led to the weight gain and everything else and so I spent 2 years in very deep therapy, in my mind, becoming a better human being, apologizing to people that I needed to go and apologize to, accepting that there was things that I was never going to be able to change, going and really flipping over all the rocks in my soul and figuring out what I needed to atone for and what other people needed to atone for me for. And when I came out the end of that, I kept the weight off with yoga and meditation and doing all this. And when I got sick in August of 23, sort of in this journey, but sort of towards the end of my weight loss and my emotional recovery journey, I sort of sat there and said, well, I think I'm probably in the best place ever to take on this journey, right? I was already there. I didn't have to do any of this work when I got sick. I think a lot of people, when they get sick, that's the time when what does it all mean? And all these things happen, right? I had done all of that 2 years before. And so when I got sick, I was able to be extremely empathetic. I was able to be extremely supportive of other people while accepting the vast amount of help that was coming to me. But sometimes I would say, look, if you're going to send prayers or good vibes or thoughts into the universe in whatever capacity, please, if you want to throw some my way, that's fine. But my Tibetan prayer flags over here, they carry everything east. And if there's more people out there that need help other than just me. And so I said, if you can spread that love and spread that positivity and spread that kindness beyond just me, take what you're feeling towards me because you know me, right? You're a friend of mine, you were a colleague, whatever. Take that love and support that you're showing towards me and show it to a total stranger that needs it as well. And that became sort of my mantra. And that's how this community started built. being built. It's built on positivity. It's built on love. It's built on just trying to get people to be better human beings. I wear a hat all the time that says "Be a kind human," and that's my walking billboard, right? That's what I wear in all of my posts and everything else, because it's not just I'm not just trying to sell hats. In fact, I don't sell that hat, right? It's me really trying to instill that the world can be a really crappy place sometimes, and the only thing that you can do is make yourself 3% better than what you were yesterday, or at least try. That's what I try to do, and whatever that means to everybody else. Make yourself 3% better than you were yesterday. And 99% of the time I fail, but I'm trying to be a little bit of a better person every single day. And that has transcribed itself through cancer, through treatment, through survivorship, through my advocacy work. There's common threads that run through all of it. And being a good human through cancer treatment and before, that's part of it.
I'm Hindu, and every religion has that in their ways written, right?
Correct.
That God has a plan for you, which we don't know because we are humans, right? We don't know what plan He has, because He can see future, we can't, right? He has written it, or at least He knows what's coming. He prepares His kids, right? And I think with your journey, as you're saying, He was preparing you, and you not knowing what you're getting prepared for, but you were preparing for it for 2 years, where your soul, your mind, your body was strong to go through this journey with the spirit that you are doing right now.
I think if I lost 120 pounds. I think if I was still the weight that I was, and more importantly, in the emotional state that I was, the mental health state that I was, I think if I had been there, this journey would not have been nearly as productive and as positive as it has been.
Finally, if you had to describe this journey in one phrase, what would it be?
A lot of people don't understand when I use hashtags a lot in my work, and people don't understand when I put hashtag lucky guy and hashtag the luckiest. How can you be the luckiest person when you have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer, right? How can you? And it is my mindset, and I think it is the mindset that anybody can have, which is using what has been put in front of you, whether that's stage 4 cancer, and trying to make the world a better place. And even if that's trying to make your corner of the world a better place, that's important. So this journey, would I have been as impactful as in many people's lives if I just started talking about male breast cancer and didn't have male breast cancer, and have this? If I just picked a topic and started talking about it on TikTok, would I have been as impactful on so many lives? No, 100%. I was given this journey. I was given this disease to go out and help people, right? Because I have the communication skills, the engagement skills, the ability to go out there and talk to people that hopefully 10, 15, 25 years down the line, when health classes are teaching their 7th grade boys about breast cancer, and we've done 25 years of male breast cancer research, that all those things are aligning, and male breast cancer is no longer a thing. I mean, that's ultimately what we want. Ending breast cancer for all is not just the message of all those other women breast cancer organizations. It's mine and ours too. It is ending breast cancer for all. And I think an important part that I just want to get in there is that I've been asked a lot about the trans community as part of this as well. And if you identify as a male, regardless of anything else, if you identify as a male, you're part of our community. If you have breast cancer and you identify as a male, you are part of us. Now, you can't give your male DNA as part of the cell line registry, but every other aspect, you can be part of this. We need clinical trial. We need our male breast cancer trained advocates that go through the grant applications. We need people that are going to help legislatively. And that does not mean that you have to be biologically male to do those things. The only thing you have to be biologically male to do is submit your DNA. Everything else, we welcome anybody that identifies as a male to be part of the male breast cancer community, because breast cancer as a whole can be dismissive of anybody else that is not a typical sort of breast cancer patient, right? And that typically is a 65-year-old white woman, right? So they can be very dismissive of a lot of other minorities within breast cancer. And, you know, being a white male, I'm not usually in the minority very often. But in this case, I am in the extreme minority. But at the same time, I play in the pink world. I understand the pink world. I will use the pink world to my advantage. Appendix cancer has 2,800 guys as well. Nobody's ever heard of appendix cancer. And so I'm happy to live under the pink world where we can use the resources. And, you know, again, would you be talking to me if it was appendix cancer? Probably not. You're talking to me because it's breast cancer, right? And it's the rarity within breast cancer. So I'm happy to do all of those things. And I feel privileged. You know, one of the things I learned very early on, I only know a couple guys that have breast cancer. I don't know very many. But one of the guys was named Danny Riggs, and he was the first one that I knew. And he has since passed. But he said, he would say things like, I get to do this every day. And I'm like, you get to do what? Have cancer? You get to go through treatment? You get to do... And it took me a long time to understand that I get to do this every day. I am privileged to be in a platform and in the ability to speak and the ability to change minds. I get to do this every day. And that's the biggest privilege of my life.
It's so powerful and beautiful. I think, as you said, it's the mindset. You can take this as an opportunity to do big things, which you are doing it, or you can take it something that it's a pause or end in the life. All about mindset. And Jake, thank you for your honesty, your courage, and your voice. You know, your story reminds us that breast cancer is not defined by gender and that awareness can't stop with women. It must include everyone. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you, friend.